Hey guys, I just want to let you know that I am now a certified spiritual life coach. If you resonate with the topics and lessons that my guests and I discuss on my podcast, and you feel that you could use some empowerment and direction in your journey of becoming who you truly are, consider booking a free discovery call with me on my website at kindlemccullough.com. And now on to the episode. Hey guys, I'm excited today. I have my friend here, Lance, my new friend Lance. Friend James Henson introduced me. Now James knows that I'm interested in astral travel, and he's friends with Lance, and knew that Lance is an experiencer of astral travel. So he hooked us up, and so this is, I think, my fourth or fifth in-person interview, and the first time I'll be using video, so it'll be a new experiment, be fun. So thanks for joining me, Lance.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Look forward to talking about it.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess we just jump right in. First, one question I like to ask my guests is just kind of their religious or spiritual or not religious or spiritual upbringing. Mm-hmm. And that definitely relates to astral travel, and people think about that. And so, yeah, sure. What was your upbringing like?
It was Christian Baptist. It was fairly strict. It was something I definitely leaned into as a kid, and had my own experiences where I took it upon myself to want to be baptized, and felt really inspired by the whole thing. And then as things gradually moved on, I just kind of found myself questioning and moving away from the religion, I guess. There wasn't much of a practice for me personally, so I think that may have been kind of the catalyst for me to move away, is that there was no real spiritual practice as far as what I do now. Like a very more personal, devoted kind of everyday kind of practice and effort, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty natural. I think as we grow up, we become our own person, and we figure out, what do I actually believe and what do I actually want to practice. And so, I think that whatever is authentic to someone and intentional, that's probably what's most healthy, what's best. And so someone who actually will take onus on themselves to really figure out what they believe and practice that. And a lot of people sometimes will just kind of go through the motions and go with what they were brought up with. And so I think that's a healthy development, I feel like.
I believe so. Find the questions for yourself and actually dive in and do some searching. It's a very personal solo kind of journey. Like any connection with spirit or with God or Christ, it's so personal that it's if you're not personally on a path of interest and just like a search, then you're not going to really come up with anything because you're not searching it out. So,
yeah, absolutely. So I guess we can just start out with, what is astral travel?
Well, astral travel is basically the separation of your consciousness and a potential astral or energetic body from the physical body into basically the physical realm, but also moving into the astral realm. Which, and I say moving into because it seems that in my experiences, whenever I actually began to experience this separation process, I kind of was naive in thinking if this is actually real, I could move out of my body, have this experience just floating around in the world, turn into Casper or something, and just experience the physical in that way, which you can, but there's also this other aspect of it where you're kind of pulled into this other place, which is the astral. It's a different dimensional space.
Right. So
it's all made up of its own, kind of different rules, and it looks different. It feels different. So,
yeah. I had a spiritual awakening 7 years ago, and I kind of had this insight into, at the time, what I thought of as levels of heaven. And then later on my spiritual journey, I started going on to this idea of dimensions. And then I had this epiphany, oh, that's the same thing. It's not like there's levels of spiritual heaven and dimensions. It's it's all the same
They
thing
are the same,
because one dimension is the physical dimension, but then higher dimensions get into spiritual or energetic, whatever you want to call it, into heavenly type of places, and some more hell-like places. So it just was a crazy cool realization, and I think it really turns my worldview and idea of the universe and how it makes sense upside down, kind of different from how I was raised, more Christian like.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Was there anything in particular that brought on that awakening for you?
Yeah.
Like any effort?
I mean, I wasn't trying to have an awakening. I didn't even know what that was. So when it happened, it was amazing, but also kind of confusing and just really chaotic. And I eventually went to the hospital and psych ward and kind of went through the dark night of the soul. So it was a whole long journey, before actually James gave me a near-death experience book, and reading that connected with a lot of my experiences and realizations, and that kind of propelled me to start my spiritual journey, that, away from more what I was raised in. Yeah, for a while I really wanted to astral travel, and I was like trying really hard. I think I got to like the vibrational state where I was, kind of felt the vibration. I even heard like a loud sound in my ears, and so these are some of the signs that people say that are right before you have the out of body experience or astral travel. But I don't think I ever quite got to it. Although when I had my awakening, I had a lucid dream of flying, which was pretty amazing. So yeah, what would you say is the difference between lucid dreaming and astral travel?
I think I think lucid dreaming can be a bridge to astral travel, but they're two completely different things. Like, a lot of experience I would have would be I would exit a lucid dream into a full blown out of body experience. And it's really interesting because, one of the main experiences that was, pretty jarring and just like one of my main intense experiences that I, wrote down, it's one of the most memorable, was out of a lucid dream. I was dreaming, became lucid. I knew I was like in this weird dream kind of state. I was like fighting with someone. It was like very like karate style. I was like jumping around. And there was like this couch in the middle of like this big open space where we were like, fighting. And the person was just jumping, like they weren't, constricted by gravity, And I was like, I know that I can do this too, because I know I'm in this dream state and there's no rules. And I leaped towards this couch, and I knew I could go through it because I knew that the same laws of physics didn't matter in this place. And you're still in this hazy dream state. When you're in the lucid dream state, it's like you're in control, or you kind of have an understanding, but there's still like this hazy kind of like fog of the dream that you're in. And as soon as I like hit the couch, I started doing this weird like flip spin, and I was just like spinning and flipping and spinning. And then all of a sudden I started having the out of body kind of astral signs, like the sounds, the vibrations. And I started hearing like a whoop, 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 and it was like as if something was coming to the surface, like when you have water in your ear and it's starting to come out. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, my eyes opened. I was in my room. I was floating up and out of my body towards my ceiling. And it was just like, you become awake. So it's like in the lucid dream, you're lucid in the dream state. When you project out of that, you're very much awake. It's just like if someone splashed water
Different
on
levels of awareness or sensation.
Yeah, you're very aware. There's no question that you are out of the dream state, and no question that you are experiencing the sensation of lifting, of separation. You see your room as it is, and you're moving towards the ceiling, so the ceiling is getting closer to your face. It's very jarring.
I've always thought that lucid dreaming was kind of your personal psyche, whatever your brain, whatever, that you're having this dream that's just personal to you. But astral travel is a shared experiences with, maybe other people who are astral traveling, other entities in other dimensions, this collective thing where, Like I'm part of an Astral Travel Reddit group, and they'll be like, "Did you go to this place?" Or "I've been to this place," and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I went to this place." Or,
yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I haven't, in all my experiences, they've been so just spontaneous and like jarring that I I don't think I've had as much control. There's been a couple of times where I've come out and I'm like, oh, it's happening, and I try and settle myself down through training of next time this happens, try and relax. Like I got to speak with a former NASA physicist, Tom Campbell, that has like a few books on this, and he worked with Bob Monroe at the Monroe Institute.
Oh yeah, I was gonna mention Bob Monroe read his books. It was amazing.
Yeah, they're nuts, right? Yeah, and that was interesting too, because as I was going through all those experiences and I started really burning through his books, I was like, man, this is really heavy. This is like, do I really want to like experience all these things he's experiencing? But so that being said, I've only had like smaller accomplishments as far as like, okay, I want to see my body when I'm outside of the body, which I experienced that. It was funny because I lifted up, floated up towards the ceiling, and I was like, oh, it's happening. Oh, I want to see my body. And it was, as if I was like planked up in the air, and I started like rotating, back down, and I could see the edge of my bed in my dark room, and I started getting scared. And I was like, I don't know if I want to see this. And I like shot down and was laying, or, I was positioned behind my physical body, and I was staring at my back, and my body was snoring. Wow. So it was snoring and my back was raising up and down. And I thought,
so you were basically like kind of in your bed, quote unquote, but it's like transparent in a way.
Well, my consciousness and my astral body, soul, whatever you want to call it, lifted up out of like a lucid dream and was like spontaneously out of body. And you feel the sensation of lifting up. But then whenever I saw my physical body in bed or was about to, I got scared and I shifted back down next to my body. And so my physical body was asleep and my conscious, awake astral body was separate. And so it's weird because outside of not seeing and feeling your physical body, you feel exactly the same. It's like you see everything the same. You're you think the same. So I'm laying there looking at my body going, holy shit, what's going on? And then I shifted into my body and there was like kind of this like electronic frequency sound, and it kind of felt uncomfortable. And then I kind of like blacked out. So, well, getting back to the point, like I've never been out longer than I think maybe 2 to 3 minutes. I did an interview once for this magazine in London because Jade Shaw, that has an online course of astral projection, she asked if anybody wanted to share their stories, and I said, yeah, sure, I will, because a lot of people didn't seem to have a lot of stories to share. And she kind of got a part wrong, and after our interview, saying that when I'm in the astral, it feels like I'm there for hours, which that's not the case. It's always feels like it's like maybe 2-3 minutes, and then I'll like black out. I told her when I had sleep paralysis that felt like forever, because it's similar to getting into like a fist fight. If you've ever been into a bad fight, it's like, it feels like it'll never end because you don't want to be in it.
Right.
So when I had my first sleep paralysis experience, that felt like forever. But I think that there are places in the astral that you are very much
timeless.
Yeah, timeless. And most people can venture there, and it is a staple. And there are people and entities that are real in there. But it's so heavy of an experience, especially for me having like children. At the time I first started having, I just had the one child. Now I have 2. But it's so much to wake up from that, take care of your family, go to work.
You have to like process it, and
so much processing. Right. And I would wake up and write down all my experiences. So I would try and memorize them, write them down. And then I had to go get to work, and it's such a heavy thing that I wouldn't be able to really conversate with most people about this. So it really got overwhelming to where I was like, and I'm only 3 years in. Actually, November 6th, just a couple weeks ago, is my 3-year anniversary of my first time coming out. So it's been a heavy 3 years.
Yeah, I bet.
So these practitioners that have been in it for decades, they give me a bit of hope,
Right.
Like, oh, maybe I'll get back to it. And
just like anything, it takes time to develop and get your skills and process it. And work with it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, one thing. What I understand about lucid dreaming versus regular dreaming is just like lucid dreaming, you're aware that you're in the dream versus normal dreaming, and then the astral travel is another layer. So tell us the story of like how you started astral traveling.
So it was basically the same as you as far as like the awakening experience. It was around 2020, going through all that, and I have bad OCD, and then with worrying about my child and going and tattooing people at close range, and then coming home, I was just really always.
And that's what you do for the audience. That's like what you do.
Yes, I'm a tattoo artist. I've been tattooing 15 years, and I paint as well. I love to paint. My paintings have moved more like, spiritual, astral, those kinds of elements. And my tattoos have as well, as much as I can get by with. But so I was having a bunch of really bad, OCD, internal, just like stress, anguish, like anxiety. And so I started working on the meditation, trying to get back to that. And me and a couple of my close friends started a little book club that was dedicated towards like spiritual topics, spiritual effort, and kind of like a little support group for one another. So I started doing these spiritual practices where I would imagine I was just like connected to everything. Like I would sit with nature, started having this like interest in like the alchemical type of imagery of like masculine and feminine. And I took it upon myself, but I used to like pray like, highest, most loving beings, please guide me towards my spiritual development for the betterment of myself and all other beings. And that would be like my daily, like I was very serious about that. And certain things I think kind of started getting like sat in my lap to practice, because for some reason I started practicing every person I would meet. I would imagine that I was that person, and I would try to dissolve this physical boundary so that I could understand maybe and conceptualize like, what do they have to go through in a day-to-day experience? Like, what is their job like? Like somebody I would go through a drive-through and I would just imagine how people treat them, and, try and treat them like I see you, like I wish nothing but the best, like highest, most loving things for you. So like within these practices, I just started having this like massive awakening where I felt connected to everything. I just felt blissful. I felt like me and a tree were the exact same thing, like just this flowing, blissful energy. And it was really powerful, and it made me feel crazy. I started feeling like I wanted to just pull over when I was driving and just go lay next to a tree. I want to stop all this rat race, what's happening. And so in that sense, I started questioning, like, what am I doing? This is kind of bizarre. And, am I being woo-woo? I started getting real judgmental towards myself. And I was like, I want something to slap me in the face, even though I couldn't deny this awakening. Like this, to me, it was truth. But for some reason, I was like, show me something more. And then I stumbled across astral projection and the Bob Monroe, like the gateway process and the declassified CIA documentation on all the reality of this out of body thing. So I was like, okay, this is crazy. And I thought all these people were wild. I would watch them. They're like, yeah, when you leave your body, I'm like, get out of here. This is ridiculous. Like these people are nuts. And, but I found so much on it that I thought, okay, well, maybe this is real. And I started getting books, started watching videos, just diving into it. And I was excited every night to practice because my wife was sleeping in the other room because our son had such bad sleeping trouble. So I would lay there and I'd close my eyes and I would just try and practice my body falling asleep while I maintained my consciousness. And it wasn't until like 6 months in where I had like you said, I had like a crazy loud internal like sound, intercranial sound, and a little bit of a vibration. I was like terrified, like, oh God, what was that? And I was like, wow, that was actually what they say. And I've never experienced that. So maybe this is real. And then I got the book by Robert Peterson, Hacking the Out-of-Body Experience. And I tried for another several months until I had like my first spontaneous out-of-body. And it definitely didn't disappoint. I was like, oh, wow, that really did slap me in the face, But I didn't think it was going to become spontaneous. It was like I knocked on this door and cultivated this inner effort towards this. It's like I've been saying lately, it's like rubbing two sticks together. You got to just keep up the friction until that spark ignites. Like if you're internally not really practicing and really serious about it, then you won't have the experience. So I really forged it out, but then I didn't expect that I was knocking on this door so hard that it would fly open and just take me whenever it felt like it. And that's what started happening. So it was like spontaneous experience after experience. And the first one was really shocking, crazy. It was just mind blowing. And then my second experience was a sleep paralysis experience, which I think lended itself to me like probably like the biggest lesson, like, you know, the dark night of the soul, like the craziest, scariest stuff that helped me truly focus on transforming my internal world. And I think that's the main benefit of astral projection, is to realize that your inner state of being is creating a reality in the spiritual that, whether you know it or not, it's happening. And I think that's like, you know, a lot of the spiritual practice, or, you know, religious talks, like with Christ and things, like the kingdom of heaven is within, you know, it's like, you know, hell is also within, if internally you're consistently, you know, negative and dark and have ill intent. When you are out of body and in this spiritual state, that place reflects that. So that's very important. You know, that's mainly what I've gained from the experience, is whatever my internal intention and the truth of who I am inside is going to be reflected to me and mirrored in my environment once I'm out of the body.
Yeah. I've heard that that's great stuff. I totally agree. I've heard that to astral travel, you have to get into this sleep paralysis state. Like that kind of is what is body asleep, mind awake.
Right. It's so it's funny because my wife had told me about sleep paralysis, and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds crazy, whatever, you know. And then she's like, yeah, sure. Because anyone that's had sleep paralysis is like, no, you don't understand. This is crazy. Like it's terrifying. And I don't think it's like you have to experience that. But it is like, people that do have paralysis, they are on the cusp. They could leave their body very easily. Since I started practicing astral projection, you begin to wake your consciousness up while your body is asleep. And in the paralysis, you know, there's like the chemical in your brain that apparently paralyzes your body so you don't act out dreams. So when you become conscious within that state, it's like, in esoteric terms, it's called the guardian of the threshold. So yeah, so that guardian, you know, Robert Peterson says he just believes it's like, it's just a product of your mind creating.
Yeah, some people say that they see a dark entity when they start trying to astral travel, and they're like, "Is it a demon or what?"
Right. So my second experience was horrific. It was traumatizing. So it was, you know, a week after my first experience, I had an argument with a friend. This following week, we drank. We talked. It was a very dark, heavy conversation about like suicide and bullying and just like really dark, negative stuff. We got into an argument. It was a bad night. And I went home and I fell asleep, was in a bad place. And I hadn't realized that, you know, I just opened myself up to this realm, and it was coming again. And I had no idea. And I become lucid in a dream. I'm walking in my closet, which became a hall. And I was like, well, this isn't my closet because my closet's not a hall. And then all of a sudden, you know, like it's like this vibration and this awareness. I snap awake, but I'm in a paralyzed state. And my room is very dark, very heavy, very frightening. And I start to hear my wife's voice, my voice, my son's voice, which was, you know, like around 2 at the time, like mumbling at the end of my bed. And then I started hearing like this, like, guttural, growling, like horrific sound right next to my ear. And have you ever watched what's the movie with Patrick Swayze, Ghost?
I haven't.
Okay, so at the end there's like, you know, the murderer, like bad person in the movie gets pulled down to the, I guess, hell by these shadow being demons, and they make all these horrific, like guttural, awful moaning screams, and it sounded exactly like that.
Wow.
And it was so loud, and it wouldn't stop, and I was just stuck there. And I tried to like get up, and I saw like my astral light bluish see-through arm as I tried to get up, and it was like shuddering, like waving, and I would fall back down like as if there was like a blanket of tar on me. And the screaming and moaning would not stop. And I was just like, please someone help me, like yelling. But of course I was yelling internally. And it continued and continued. And then it finally just like kind of let me go and went away. And I was just like shaking and just petrified. And, you know, as soon as I got up and was like around and free from it, I was just like, what have I done? What have I opened myself up to? What is this? But then, you know, over the next couple of weeks, I did a bunch of research. I found this lady, Jade Shaw, and she was talking to someone on YouTube, and they were explaining how horrific of an experience they had with this. And she's like, oh, it's okay. You know, like, no big deal. You just got to like transform your thoughts to good thoughts and all these things. And so I was just like, okay, like, let's go. Cause like every time the sun would start going down for the next 2 weeks, I would start shaking. I was petrified. So I started working on this internal space of, okay, you know, like love, peace, wisdom, what do those things feel like, you know? And so I had this mantra, like, love's within my heart. And I would think of like hugging my son. Peace is within my mind. I would think of meditating under a tree with the wind blowing through the leaves. Wisdom's within my soul, like my higher self, or, you know, my spiritual side knows better than this. So, and I would do this mantra over and over again. So then 2 weeks later, I woke up in the paralysis state, and I was like, oh God, it's happening. Peace, love, wisdom, whatever. And I was just, and everything was kind of like neutralized. And I was like, okay, roll out. And I did this rollout technique, and I like roll out and burst kind of out of my body in this like hazy cloud. And I could see like blues and purples. And I was like, wow, I've done it. I'm out. And I just had this whole other experience, and I've never had another bad negative experience. But that like just concreted to me how important your internal dialogue is, and your intentions, and how you feel and view everything in your everyday, you know, process of living, like how you experience other beings, you know, because you can lie outwardly, but internally, you know, if you're being truthful or not.
Right.
So I actually do a practice where I imagine if all my thoughts could be heard out loud. And that is a very powerful practice, because, you know, you'll be sitting with a stranger, and maybe your mind starts going towards these weird, gross places of judgment and yada, yada. But it's like, what if this person could hear me? Do I want them to feel that? Do I want to represent myself that way? 90% of the time, you know, people I think would say no. So it always comes back to like, you know, love and respect for you. You're just another being like me. I wish the best for you. Here we are in this bizarre world we're in, you know? And I think that that's the most important thing I've gained from astral practice in general. And then that lends itself to more of an understanding of like what Christ talked about and those things. So I'm really close. I have a, you know, more of a cultivated relationship with the idea of Christ, and trying to act more Christ-like, because all those things reflect exactly what this practice taught me. So,
yeah. So do you feel like astral travels helps you understand what he was trying to say in a deeper level?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly, you know, what's going on. Like, you know, the kingdom of heaven is within. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? You know, It's like, well, if you go within and you work within yourself, and you create this pure, loving, truthful, you know, sincere kingdom within, then the only thing that resides there is heavenly. It's goodness, it's love, it's compassion, you know, it's all these things that represent heaven, you know, in my mind. Yeah. So to me, like having such a shocking, I guess, what's the word? Just revelation with that experience, that lends itself to me to be like, oh, okay, now I understand it in a way that's not so shallow, you know? And yeah, and in so many ways, I mean, just like being like pure and loving and kind and compassionate, like you're setting your, you know, vibration to this highest, most loving state. And to be in this highest, most loving state when you die, or when the body dies, and or you spontaneously go into this realm of spirit where everything is so thought sensitive,
Mm-hmm.
you will experience what your internal cultivation is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the spiritual perspective. That, wherever you're at and your level of development, your consciousness, that's what you're going to experience in the afterlife. And, just like Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is here now. And then we can know that, and understand that through things like astral travel and realize, and even, daily life, but that helps us understand that, our internal experience dictates how we perceive the world and what we experience, and how positive and negative that is. But also, after death, that continues, and it's not just like, it's not about this, are you saved, are you baptized, and if so, you're going here, and if not, you're going to hell. And that it's kind of a fantasy that, people like the get out of jail free card.
Exactly. That's why I moved away from it, because I felt like this is such a shallow thing that it can't be this simple. But
Right.
I had no idea how to, move into it in a way that would shed more light, in a way that I could trust. And I don't think anything can do that besides personal knowing and experience. It's like, people can know, or people can believe what I'm saying is real. Like, when I first heard it, I was like, that's crazy. I don't know if I believe that. But to experience it, because you just can't, if someone slaps you in your face, you're like, I know that hurt.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that it's way more of a, maybe the dialect of the time makes it a little bit more cryptic to us now, but I think it is more of a practice. It's like, no, it's very serious that your internal state of being and who you honestly are internally, towards others, towards life, towards
yourself,
towards yourself, is what's going to be reflected to you once you're outside of this body.
Yeah.
Because this physical world is so dense and slow,
right,
that I kind of see it as like a capacitor, like capacitor, like pulls in energy and it like lets a little bit out. And I feel like that's what the body kind of is. It's like this, we're like this slow container of experience that once we're outside of it, everything is so magnetized and it's so, like people say in NDEs, that it was realer than real,
Yeah.
And that's how I felt when I'm out of body. It's like, I feel like I'm a lightning bolt, or like I'm going to get struck by lightning. Everything is so ultra sensory.
Like being on psychedelics too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's odd too, is like there are very psychedelic-esque, visuals and effects when out of body. I went outside once to be next to my tree, and I looked up and everything was just like this like swaying of energy. It's really hard to describe.
Like when you had a astral travel experience, like you went outside and
I was out of body, and I was like, I want to go outside, and I like shifted through the door and was out next to a tree, and I was like, I want to go to my other tree, my big oak tree, which is my favorite, and I just like snapped to it like a rubber band, and I was there, and there was just like this swaying in like my peripheral, like left to right, and I like looked up, and all I could see were the trees and kind of like this bluish purple kind of haze, like vignette surrounding looking up, and then the stars twinkling, and everything was just like breathing in this like magical way. So it was very like kind of psychedelic. It's beautiful. Very, very beautiful. I've had very extreme experiences that I just, like the biblical type of experience where people talk being like engulfed by light. I had one experience one morning where I woke up and felt like this lightness and this static, and was like, oh, it's happening. It's happening. It's always like this, like kind of excited, startling thing. And it was bright. It was in the morning. One of the things I don't like about astral travel, it's like usually happens in the middle of the night, and it's like you plucked out of your body floating up in darkness, and it's scary. But this was a morning experience, and I was just like engulfed in light, and it was just like this beautiful white golden kind of light. And when you're underwater and you look up at the sun, the sun's kind of doing this dance. That's kind of what it looked like, but I was like engulfed in it. And I heard like this high pitched like frequency sound, but it also sounded kind of angelic, like like this really high, beautiful sound, not like how I sound. And it was just like bliss, and I started feeling like I was merging with the light, like I was the light somehow, like as if I was like fluid and just started like flowing into the fluid of this beautiful, warm, loving bath type feeling. And I just felt like bliss, and it just kept getting better and better. And I was just like, wow, what is this incredible experience I'm having? And I started noticing my arm felt like it was like pinned under my back, like as if it was vibrating. And I was really confused by that. I was like, I've never fallen asleep on my arm, you know? And so within astral travel, when you're out of the body, as soon as you think of your physical, you snap back to it. And like the hardest thing is staying out. And so as soon as I did that, I started lowering, and I was like, no, please, no, I don't want this to end. This is so incredible. What is this? And I lowered down into myself. And once I like went into sync with my body, my arm was just laying on my stomach. So I guess I was floating a little bit above my body, and I could feel the sensation of my arm, you know, laying on my belly, but I thought it was behind my back. But since I thought of my body, I went back down into it. And then, you know, I was just like, God, thank you for that experience. Like, wow, how incredible, you know? It was just pure bliss, you know? And that's why I love NDEs, because like, I think we both mentioned like watching them consistently as like this
reminder.
Yeah, this reminder, this anchoring point, like, oh yeah, there is this, and it's not just me that goes through this, you know, because so many people talk about these things, you know, like the people talk about 360-degree vision. I had that my first astral experience, and I was like, what's happening? And there's no way to explain it. You just experience it, and you're like, how am I seeing from 3 different points? Like, this is bizarre. Like an eye that just like turns into a big circle or something. It's really hard to explain. And then I experienced like the void, like this big black space where I just felt like I was, you know, centered in the most massive black empty space you could imagine.
I had a void experience doing meditation.
Really?
I read about a guy who meditated and like, or well, did it happen sometimes you can stop breathing in meditation. I was like, I don't know if this is real or not, but I'm gonna like meditate and try to like not breathe. And I don't know if I stopped breathing, but I lost, because in meditation you get more heightened sense that you're breathing. You can tell more, and that's like part of what anchors you to meditation. But I eventually lost that sense that I was breathing, and then I entered that void state, and everything was black, and it was just like, but it was so like bizarre and weird. It felt like very existential and like kind of scary. And and when I came out of it, I was like, I experienced that. That was interesting, but I don't know if I like that.
That's exactly, that's exactly how I felt. I was like, what is this? I do not want to be here. Get me out of here. But looking back, I'm like, I mean, it was very neutral.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's so interesting that you had that experience with meditation. Yeah, it's like it's so abstract, right? Because it's like, what is that space? Is it a space of infinite possibility? Or, you know, people talk about when they have these NDEs going to this black space, and there, I think like whatever your internal kind of dialogue and like operating system is what you start to manifest or gravitate towards. Like people start experiencing darkness or whatever, or they say, you know, God, please help me, in a pinprick of light starts to show up. So I always wonder, if I was in that state, if I wouldn't have willed myself out of it, what would have happened? If things would have just started subconsciously manifesting, or if I would have called on an angel or a light being or Christ, if something would have came and retrieved me out of that, you know, because I do think that they are basically the same plane as, you know, when you pass away or your body is malfunctioned in some kind of way, that you enter this place, like maybe this in-between state. I think like the infinite possibility of the spiritual is infinite, you know. So
infinite dimensions.
Yeah, infinite dimensions, exactly. So to enter into that other space, you know, or dimension is so bizarre, because it's so massive and you don't know the rules, and you're just like, where am I? So a lot of that's what kind of like made me shy away from diving more into astral practice. But
there's a lot of people who talk about going to places with these entities or different things, and they'll look at you like what are you doing? You're
Yeah.
it's like you've entered a different culture and there's all these unspoken rules and regulations, and you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, what I'm not supposed to do, and like, am I supposed to be here? Actually,
Yeah.
I'll tell you a really short, funny story. But my friend wanted to go to this volleyball tournament the other day, and someone posted this tournament on this Facebook volleyball group. So we went to it, and it's all Asians, and we're the only like non-Asian people, and we're like, what's happening?
Yeah, should we
I like talked to him, and he's like, I was like, is this? He's like, yeah, this is Asian League. We're all from the Philippines. We all know. And I was like, do you all know each other? He's like, yeah. But they gave us visitor tickets, and like no one said anything. But
he felt out of place. Yeah. Like you're like, am I gonna do things right? Am I like gonna disrespect anyone?
Right. I'm like, there's like no other guests, the visitors there. I'm just like, I don't know what is happening. But we just watched for a while and then left. So.
Yeah. See, just like even that like little experience feels big inside, right?
You're
right. Like, I feel kind of uncomfortable. Exactly. Like so that on like a spiritual, side is massive. You're just like, what am I doing here? Who are these beings? Like, I haven't had many like being encounters. I'm usually reluctant to talk about that just because as if the whole thing doesn't sound crazy enough. Right. My first experience was really bizarre. I didn't have any of the like preliminary signs. I didn't have vibrations or any of those things. I woke up at 5 a.m. because the wife had to go take care of the kid. I took like 45 minutes to fall back asleep, which later I found out is the wake back to bed method, which is the most effective way to have an out-of-body experience. Right. So I did that accidentally, a year into practicing, and then I finally spontaneously had one. But so I fall back to sleep finally, and I jerk awake, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? My eyes just like popped open. And I saw my legs float up out of my bed, like light bluish versions up. And it was just like this shocking, quiet, like stark, quiet experience of like shock and terror. And then my head and chest started like, floating up as well. And I ended up in this like U shape and floated up. I ended up in some house. I was in a bedroom. There was like 2 beds in front of me, like little children looking beds. They were all made up and nice. The room was dark and it had like this green glow as if there was like some kind of like night vision going on that I was looking through. And the door at the end had a light and I could hear people walking around. So I was like, where am I? What is going on? This is so bizarre. And I took it in for a second and was just like, I want to leave. I got to get out of here. This is really creepy.
You feel like you're like intruding.
Yeah. And I was just like, who's going to walk through the door? Where am I? Yeah, I was not supposed to be there. And then I went to the black void and it was just like black. And it was just, I felt like I was in just a massive warehouse with the lights shut off.
Can you, so it's like hard to even ask. How do you, reading Bob Monroe's book, he talks about different experiences, and so he kind of calls when you're experiencing the physical earth and you're kind of going around your astral body, looking at different places and stuff like that, calls out the etheric dimension. So you're like right next to the earth, you're experiencing that. And then more spiritual places or whatever that calls out the astral. So how do you get from like the etheric to the astral? Is it just like a snap and things change, or do you like travel somewhere, or what is that like?
I think so. Bob Monroe also talks about like to be outside of the body in the physical is very uncomfortable for the astral body. It's like as if the astral body does not want to be there, and it's like magnetized to shift towards those other.
It's kind of like it's like, oh, we're an astral body. We're supposed to be in the astral, but we're like in between. Like your physical body is its natural place, and then astral body, and so you're kind of
stuck in this. Yeah. Like, well, and that's what's odd is that first experience. So I was in that room and then I went to this void space and I was in the void and I was terrified and I was like, this is uncomfortable. I don't want to be here. I want to be around like a bunch of stars. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, I was like in space around thousands of stars. I was like, this is incredible. And then I started having the 360-degree vision. It's like my vision started like pulling out from this central location I felt I was at.
You're like zooming out. I've had a meditation where I felt like it was weird. I felt like I was looking at the side of my body, and I felt like my consciousness was different from my body, and I like zoomed way out and
Mhm.
saw like the universe and like stars, and like zoomed like way in, and I was like, I see like tiny little things.
Yeah, it's so I think
Yeah.
it's like our consciousness is like unbound in that
Yeah,
way.
it's unbound, and you can zoom in and zoom out. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I saw like I zoomed out of myself and saw like through myself, which I just was I could see myself as just like a thin outline of a person. It was like a silhouette, but I could see through myself stars. And so all this was happening, and I was like, wow, this is actually happening. I'm doing it. I've tried for months, most of a year. And I said, well, if I can do anything, I want to go to ancient Egypt. And this got really bizarre. This is the part of the story I usually don't tell just because it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden everything went black. I was back like to this void, and I was like, oh, here we go again. And this red, like energetic, fiery line kind of appeared. And then an image started appearing, and it was a pyramid, but it was a Mesoamerican flat top pyramid. And I was like, okay, well, this is odd. I know the difference between a Mesoamerican pyramid and the pyramids of Giza. Where's the 3-pointed, pyramids? And these two kind of like hazy apparitions started appearing on both sides of it. And I was just staring in awe and confusion. And one of the apparitions took full form, and it was Anubis. And there was like an Ankh floating down by his side. And I at the time didn't even know his proper name. I was just like, it's the dog head Egyptian deity. Oh, what's going on? And and the other one was starting to take form, but I was too focused on Anubis and this red, like glowing light surrounding this Mesoamerican pyramid. And I was just staring at Anubis, and Anubis' head like slowly like turned and looked at me, and I just was like, oh, I just blacked out. And I was like, it's too much. Like, what's happening? And I blacked out, and I woke up. The next morning was like, wow, that happened. Oh my God. And all day I was just like outside, like rubbing my head, like, did I just go crazy? Did that actually happen? Wow. And then it was a week later, I had the first paralysis, and then all these other experiences. But I've never really had any other entity experiences other than that, really. There's been like random people, but then it like turns into like goes back into a lucid dream. So that's what's odd.
So you feel like a lot of times those are just apparitions of your own psyche, like
potentially, but maybe. the Anubis one, no, I felt like that was like this real, like it, like the astral is like this imaginative realm, like the Tibetan Buddhists would call it, but they say that is more real than this. Like we're unconsciously, collectively creating this physical hallucination together. So it's not to say that anything in that realm is just like false, but it's like, whatever.
It's more like Play-Doh, where you can shape it more to your desire, and it happens quicker. Where like physical,
right. It's like instant, right? Yeah, it's like the dimension of all possibility and opportunity. But I don't know, because the Mesoamerican pyramid made no sense to me, because even staring at it, I knew the difference. So if that was the case, why didn't it come up like I imagined? So it's like these things came up on their own and looked at me in a way that they seemed very much outside of my control and outside of my manipulation.
Right.
So to me, that was a real encounter. But I know within that space, I don't know if you're creating things or if you're just magnetizing, or you're not even that you're manifesting them. It's that you're aligning yourself to their gravitational pull, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
some people talk about like alternate timelines, and well, even Bob Monroe talks about a third type of travel is going to like different timelines. So it's like if this didn't happen in the world, if it was different, then things would have developed this way. And so he like went to this place where there was like cars, but they were so different, and they were like not electrical engines and these different things. And so it was like he was so confused because it was like Earth, but it was also very different. And he's like, this couldn't be, or it's not the way it is here. And so
it's interesting.
Very interesting.
That's what's so tricky about, like, you start like experiencing this space and you're like, I have no clue the gravity. And Bob Monroe, like his whole dedication of his later years into this, and how much he's had thousands of experiences and tried to map out the astral.
Right.
And like one of his last interviews, he talks about how naive he was
thinking he could,
thinking he had like some understanding of this, like all this like endless dimensional space of possibility and alternatives, like these alternative, lifelines. I mean, because a lot of people in near-death experience, they're told or shown what their life could have been if at one pivotal point, if they made a different decision.
Right.
So maybe like that state in that place is a dimension of all of those things. It's just like this like infinite library of potentials.
Yeah, like some people call it the Akashic library.
Records,
Akashic records.
Yeah, the Akashic records, and so it's like to go into that and to feel that you have any kind of true understanding of it, I think is, for someone like Bob Monroe to admit how naive he was. And
he's had more experience than probably most people.
Oh, yeah, more experiences than most. And like, his whole life's dedicated to it. He had government assistance with the Monroe Institute. Like, he's had every bit of opportunity to be the one. And he's very intellectual, very intelligent.
Right. And he tries to come at it from a scientific point of view.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, that didn't work.
I tried.
I tried.
Yeah.
Because, like the infinite consciousness and Godhead or whatever the whole spiritual realm is so massive. And but that lends itself to us, like, in a way, I think that, like, our potential is so massive.
Yeah.
Like, anything that we would like to achieve for our life or see the within our community, we can have such a strong hand in informing, but I think people belittle themselves so much, and we're kind of traumatized to think that we need to be in a fearful state and a belittled state. And that's why the idea of astral travel is terrifying for people, because we're trained to kind of be fearful and
the unknown, and it like, I know a lot of Christians, like, anything spiritual is scary, and like we fear so much of it's demonic, or we're not supposed to like delve into that kind of thing. I don't know if you have anything specific like you would say about that.
For my personal experiences, me diving into that has taught me so much and given me so much goodness in spiritual development in my personal life, that I think that that's incredibly false and just misguiding. I think it's a misdirection of who we are as beings, and like our connection to God, because in all these practices, it's done nothing but benefited my life. And I feel like everyone's life that I'm in contact with, because I offer them nothing but unconditional love and support and compassion. And I feel like that's what Christ taught. In most of these religions that people are in this like fearful state, maybe it's because internally they're not honestly, they don't want to be fully exposed to the spiritual and like God and like, hell, because whenever you are fully exposed to the reality of those things, it's just a mirror that shows up. Like,
right. Yeah. I think,
are you?
When people have negative experiences, I think that so much they'll externalize it, be like, oh, that's saying get away from me, instead of me like, what is this saying about myself that's going on in my psyche that has something for me to learn and to delve into and be like, understand and work through that, so I can. And so the same thing with astral travel, like even your paralysis, you know what, I have some control over this, and what can I do to make this a better experience, and what can I learn from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever it comes to that, I feel like, there are those aspects of like entering into this spiritual space where you're like, I don't know the rules. I don't know what I'm going to encounter. I don't know its intention.
Isn't it life though?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, just dive in. Exactly. But that is what's cool about it, is like, it really comes down to your internal relationship with yourself and with all other beings. What is your intention? So I think I don't know that it's for everyone. I know everyone can do it, because I feel like that other space, and all of our longing for love and acceptance and everything.
Connection.
Yeah, connection is just going home, or it's just going back to what we truly are, which is a sliver, or this little shard of God and ultimate consciousness. So I think to open yourself up and surrender to the vulnerability of experiencing the spiritual, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Everything comes down to your intention,
Yeah. I think that, people have different trajectories, and, they have free will too, so they can decide, if they want to go on this path or go somewhere else. But so with astral travel, I think that, some people, maybe it's meant for them and some people it's not. And then also depending on their choices, that could happen or not,
right?
Whether or not it's meant for them originally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I do think that maybe there's points where some people are ready for it and some are not, and maybe some just don't experience it even if they want to, because they're not ready for it, or maybe it's not their path. And so,
right.
I when I had my spiritual journey, I was, looking into a lot of things and trying different things. And, like I said, I wanted to astral travel. I was trying and it wasn't quite happening. And so I got to a point where, like, maybe this isn't for me, or maybe it's just not for me right now. And right. So I would love to experience it. But like I said, some of your experiences through meditation, I've experienced similar things. And, I think there's a lot of overlap in many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are. And I think it's not so black and white, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's like there is a very, giant gray area. And I think most of that gray area is just our perspective of what it is. Like I really had to train myself to be like, I'm not this body. And that's an abstract thing to do because we're so attached to our body.
Right.
So yeah, whenever you get deep into meditation, it's like trying to ride a bike. When you try so hard, you finally just stop, and then you get on, and all of a sudden it all works.
Right. You have to surrender.
Yeah. So it's like, I think it's in the Bible as well, like talking about like to find God, it's like through a narrow gate. Or, it's like this like very still, very narrow, perfect little, sliver of space you find yourself in. So maybe through, those meditative practices of yours, you find yourself all of a sudden there, and there kind of is no difference between that and an astral projection.
Yeah, a lot of times when I'm, having these experiences, I'm not searching for them necessarily.
Right.
It just happens.
Yeah. It's like, that's what happened to me with all the spontaneous stuff. It's like, I thought I'd have more control, and that was what was so unsettling. I was like, oh God, it's taking me whenever it wants to, and it was just so spontaneous.
That's like a lesson for life, though. Like life happens, and we just have to surrender to it. And,
absolutely. That's what Tom Campbell, that physicist, told me. I said, I'm having trouble when I go out of body, that I'm just like flipping out. I'm nervous. I'm surprised. And he said, well, you should probably practice point of awareness meditation, which is where you're just a point of awareness. And like James Henson, our mutual friend, talked about, like, if you could remove your emotions from the situation, the same kind of thing. So this point of awareness meditation where you just allow and you just observe. And that's something I try and work on a lot.
Yeah.
Just observing, try not to absorb. So yeah, maybe that's that little narrow gate sliver, is to just be just aware and detached and just neutral as possible. And that's when those things can happen. Yeah.
I love the visualization of like a stream, like leaves. Like, you don't have to be the stream, just observe it and let it flow through. So whatever thoughts or emotions or sensations, you just let them flow through. You don't bury them and you don't attach to them, but you watch them and watch as they move past and realize that they're not eternal. They'll be there and then they'll be gone.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Yeah. Those visualization practices are wonderful. Me and two of my friends started a group called Observing Mind. It's like a free meditation group open to the public on Saturday, but we're trying to do it like maybe once a month. And I don't know, it's off to a slow start, but that's kind of the intention, is to have people come out and have these kind of conversations and do some guided meditations to help them visualize things.
That's great. Yeah, James used to do that himself.
Yeah. And that's what's funny is my friend Annie, that's part of the group that was pushing for us to start it. She used to go to James meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, man, I really wish or miss that. We should
Yeah.
start one. And so
Yeah.
then it finally came to fruition, and we've been trying to get that off the ground.
Yeah, awesome. We'll talk more about that afterwards.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, one thing that Bob Monroe talks about in his third book, which is really interesting, is kind of like the future of the earth.
Mhm.
And he like traveled to that.
Yeah,
And he
it's wild.
Yeah, it was amazing. And he talks about how the earth had kind of shifted into this, the earth and the people in it, and into the more like 5D or beyond, where they still have their bodies, but they also a lot of times choose to be roaming around in the astral, and so they'll go back into their body sometimes and be going around on the earth, and then other times they're just flying around or doing whatever. And that the earth had kind of reverted more back to its natural state, not so much like cities and cars and stuff like that, because it's like we can travel all we want and meet each other, whatever, in the astral, and so
we don't have to harm the earth with all these things.
Yeah,
I know I brought that up to someone just the other day, how interesting I thought that was, that he saw this future potential of us not needing our physical bodies, but they're like this secondary vehicle that we can play in if we feel so inclined. But for
it's like they're like our cars. We want to drive our cars.
Yeah, it's like, you want to drive your car? I mean, not really. It's like, I'm gonna do all this because this is better and more fun. And I think about that too, like just the potentials of what this means to have this reality of this out of body potential. If everybody knew that or experienced that, how could that change the world? And that is an incredible potential. You know, it's like all these things that we thought we needed, like we really don't need.
Yeah, I've heard, and it's a really interesting perspective, that all the external things we have and technology and all this stuff is actually just externalized inner technology that we possess, but we have forgotten.
I believe that 100%. Because I always think that it's like anytime they come up with these things, it's like if you're into the metaphysical spiritual world, you're like, well, that's just kind of a, this new kind of synthetic version of what already exists in the natural state of being, right? Yeah, it's so interesting. I think everything is just like a poor attempt at creating a man-made version of what already exists.
We are co-creators.
Exactly.
And it's like with AI now, it's like, oh, what is consciousness? And this is just what if there's like higher beings that we're a part of, like we're the AI version of them or something, it's just layers.
So layered. And that's exactly. And that's the whole higher self meditation, higher self idea, is that we're just like this lower aspect of ourself experiencing this, whereas like the higher levels of ourself are just like in these higher planes watching us go through this.
Bob Monroe talks about that, how like he found like his past selves, and like all of his past selves and him like combined together like are his higher self, and like he like talked to his higher self, and then of course then there's like God, which is like all of our higher selves together. Like
it's all
I think of it like as like this triangle. It's like the lower dimension gets further and further out the triangle, and then like the higher and higher things start coming together until it's all just like one.
Right. No, that's a cool way to see it. It's it's so interesting, right? It's like all these aspects. They also talk about soul retrieval and astral projection, where there's like, say, this traumatized, splintered off part of yourself that had a horrific experience as a kid. You've moved away from it. You've like shunned it away. Like you've tried to outgrow it, whatever, protect yourself from that. And whenever you enter into the astral, you can find those parts of yourself still in that state and offer them like love and guidance and acceptance. And
that's part of like the coaching work I do, is the somatic meditation, like parts work of like, what is your lower self, or like your younger self, or different parts of yourself like that's still traumatized, that's still affecting you, and how can you not just shun that or push it away, but form a better relationship and offer that love, so you can have this relationship, and what can it teach you, and how can you function better now? Yeah,
that's great. I feel like that's like some of the most important work, if not the most important work we can do, is to try and offer ourselves, like through all the layers of our experience we've had since childhood, like to offer that part of ourselves compassion and acceptance and guidance and reintegration with ourselves, say it's okay. Let's move on. Let's move past this. And then you can offer that to other people. I feel like so much easier, because if you can offer it to all these parts of yourself, you realize that everyone else has those multi layers of things they've gone through, and that they're just trying to figure things
Right.
out.
Yeah. It helps you have more compassion, empathy. Like, you know what? Because one thing you realize a lot of times when people, are acting in ways that are not loving or whatever towards themselves or other people, they revert back to like a more mature, like younger version of themselves. And and then once you see that and realize it, like, oh, you know what? That's just a younger traumatized part of themselves that is like taking control right then. So
absolutely. Yeah. It's like there's all this subconscious stuff going on, like this operating system that we're not even really sure of why we're doing things, or, it's
right.
like
we're acting unconsciously.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what the act of any spiritual practice is, just like the Buddha is like to awaken, like to be fully conscious with the reality of all of your experience and the reality around you, and the role you play in all your experiences and all those experiences around you that you can affect. Like people in NDEs talk about how certain things they've said or small actions they've done have affected people in massive ways. And I always think about that, if I can smile at someone, or I can tell someone that, hey, don't talk about yourself like that. You're doing great. Like, you have all the potential in the world, these things that can send off a beneficial ripple within their life that could ripple until they're gone. It's like, why not try and be a part of that, And so I think that's the work we're supposed to do, is realize that ourselves, as well as everyone else, is just going through this chaotic, bizarre time in search of connection and God and compassion and love. And if we can just treat ourselves and each other like that, then, we're doing the good work.
Yeah.
We're doing what we should be doing.
Yeah. So with astral travel, I think obviously it changes your perspective on the universe and what's going on. So I guess like with when I had my awakening, it was amazing. And then I came like crashing down. I was put on meds. I didn't feel that anymore.
Yeah.
I had such a craving for that experience again. And it was so hard to go about daily normal life.
Right.
How is your experience of, waking life? That's one thing I want to say too, real quick, is it's a funny shift in thinking about like maybe what we consider waking is the opposite, and like sleeping is like, what, actually we're this world, this life is sleeping, and then when we're asleep, quote unquote, that's actually the awake, like our spirit's awake.
Right.
But how does that affect your life afterwards? Like when you're awake, has it been difficult to kind of?
It has been. It's been odd. It's like, I think part of me kind of it got to a point where my experiences were so consistent and so heavy, and the variations of them were just bizarre. As in one morning, like I had an experience where I was like going through a tunnel. I could see, like this wormhole, I could see through it, and the outside, it was just like the classic wormhole, images that they put online. It's like, I'm actually experiencing that. This is this real thing.
Is a wormhole a black hole? Is that?
It was like a wormhole. It was like this skinny, like really fast tunnel that you could see through. It looked like a infinite kind of worm, so I would imagine that would be a wormhole. Maybe shifting from the physical plane to
like the tunnel and near-death experiences,
right?
They go to.
Yeah. And I had one morning where I woke and saw I was in this really large, slow churning tunnel of clouds, and there was like a bright blue sky at the end of it. And I just had awoken into this awareness of watching this and being kind of overwhelmed by the fact that this is a real sensation. This is really happening in whatever context it's happening. And, was just like, what's happening? This is insane. And then it kind of went away because of like the anxiety or the massiveness of it, I kind of like blacked out. That's like my go-to move.
Yeah.
Oh, this is too much blackout.
I mean, there's been meditations where like the energies felt so strong and it just made me so sleepy, and sometimes I just fall asleep. But then like I kept doing it and kept working on myself, and like then I was able to handle it, and I feel like, oh wow, like maybe I'm healing or growing, and like now I'm able to handle this level. So maybe that's like kind of a similar thing.
Yeah, it's like if you can find yourself to like remove your emotions about the situation, it's actually, there's a lot of wonderful sensations and experience you can have within that. And maybe I'll get to that point, but I did have a point where I just said, I really need this to end, because it's too much for me to go through these experiences, to process these experiences and go about my daily life. So I basically prayed, like, please shut this door that I knocked so hard for you to open, because I just kind of can't take it.
Yeah.
And it did. And I kind of, was like, okay, let's just get back to normal day-to-day life. Like, because it was hard to keep my head out of this space. And, I would go about my daily life, and then it would just like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh yeah, I'm having these other incredible experiences. How do I just, function in this day-to-day life? And especially with, I'm not good at small talk. I like to go deep. I live there. I stay there. Yeah. So it's like,
That's what I love about podcasts. People are just ready to jump in.
Let's get it. Yeah. It's like, this is the time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, this is what I want all the time.
Yeah. So yeah, I found that I didn't have that outlet to be able to have these kind of conversations. So I was like, this just has to kind of stop, because now I just want to go be like a monk and just like, this is my life.
Right.
But I have a mortgage and a family.
Yeah.
So I need to take care of my family. So in my everyday life, it was it became a bit overwhelming, but I'm to a point now where I feel like if I did start to have these experiences again and be like, okay, I'm just getting back into this realm of experience. I don't have like a massive desire to have that, because I feel like I'm here in the physical for a short amount of time. And while I'm here, I'm going to try and, take care of those around me. And, I love the idea of like the bodhisattvas, that would find enlightenment, not saying I found enlightenment, but that would find this like peak of spiritual development. But instead of like chasing that, they go back to help others, and so I try and focus on just giving anyone and everyone around me, just compassion, acceptance, and encouragement. And if that moves into some type of spiritual practice, that's great. But yeah, I feel like the work to be done here with all the NDEs I watch is one of, encouragement, acceptance, compassion. So that's more of what I focus on now.
Right. So they've stopped altogether?
Pretty much. Like I'll have little glimpses. Like I've had like some prophetic stuff happen, which someone that James had introduced me to, I don't know if you know him, Dr. Mark Walker. He's a very interesting person. He had many spiritual experiences. He did a bunch of mission work in Uganda, Africa, helping the poor. He was a doctor, so he'd take care of them and stuff. And I don't want to get too lost into his personal story, but he became very close to me because whenever I reached out to James, I was like, I'm having these experiences. He said, well, I know someone else that's having these. I was like, oh, I thought you were going to say I was crazy and tell me maybe I should get some pills. But okay, I guess this is happening,
Yeah.
And so I met this man and we became very close. He's very compassionate, very, Christ driven. And for the past, we had 2 years of a really solid relationship, and we had spent the whole day together with another mutual friend of ours, and talking about this kind of stuff. And he talked about a lot of his personal trauma as a kid growing up. And well, long story short, the next day he had committed suicide, and this was around 8 or 10 months ago. And that really hurt. That really like shook me in a way that kind of made me clam up towards a lot of these type of experiences. And I think the overwhelming confusion of that experience with him, because I've dealt with a lot of death and suicide. I've, a lot of my friends are pretty gnarly punk hardcore characters, and like, a lot of like,
it's probably the kind of tattoo scene.
Yeah. And the tattoo scene. And a lot of people, have just lived very intense lives, and a lot of them have fallen susceptible to suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So this was just another one of those experiences, but not to downplay any of them, but with him, it was like we had the spiritual connection of these out of body experiences, like this deep connection of, just these spiritual experiences that you don't really have with a lot of other people. So it's like this comfortable space you have with them. And so when he left in that manner, for the past like 8 to 10 months, however long it's been, I've kind of shelled up and kind of been a little bit more directed towards materialism. I've been drinking and like trying to focus on my hardcore band with my friends and tattooing, and I know what I'm doing, but it's like it's just me trying to put Band-Aid over that wound. But and a lot of people in the astral projection world talk about being able to encounter deceased loved ones, and I felt fearful to do that or just like apprehensive. Right. But I got to a point where after a few months in, I said, Spirit, God, Christ, please show me that Dr. Mark's okay. Please show me something, like some type of connection back to these experiences. And it was literally like, I think the next night or the night after, I had this dream where I woke up and it was a vision. It was like a lucid dream, but a little bit more than a lucid dream because it felt like I became awake like I do in my astral. And it was like this white, overly washed out, exposed scene of this woman's hand. And she was handing me items, and she handed me 3 items, and I knew that they were Dr. Mark's. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Thank you for giving me these. Yeah, he's my dear friend. I'm glad to have these. And then the vision went away, and I, like blacked out. Woke up the next day, forgot about this vision in this dream. And I was going to have coffee with my friend that also knew him, which was a female. We sat down, I was like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. I hope you're well. And she goes, oh, I have 3 things of Mark's to give you. Oh, wow. And I was like, no way. Wow. And I was just like, thank you. I just was, thank you, God. Thank you. Right. Guides, whatever. And I just couldn't, I was like, wow, thank you. I couldn't deny it. And then as the day went on, I was like, did that really happen? What's going on? I'm confused. And I woke up the next morning in the middle of, it was probably like 4 or 5 a.m. It was still dark out. And in my left ear, as I usually hear for whatever reason, I heard this woman's voice, like as plain as day, say, look at your phone. And I was like, I turned around, no one was there. I was like, okay. I picked up my phone, and it was 5:55 a.m. And I was like, wow, okay, thank you for that. And I started having a lot of like the angel number things happen before then. And I kind of thought, oh, is this me just kind of like looking for them? But then I talked to my dad, and his dad had passed. And when I brought this up to him, he said, I've been having the weirdest thing happen since my father passed. Like every night I'll wake up for no reason, look at the clock, and it's 3:33 a.m. And, not to venture off of what you're asking about my, those certain experiences, but like, when those things happen, they're kind of enough for me now to say, thank you. I just, thank you for showing me that. I'm going to get back to the work, which is taking care of my family and showing my community love and, support in any way I can. So yeah, no like full spontaneous out of bodies in quite a while, but I feel like I asked for that door to kind of close purposefully, but I feel like, that prophetic kind of vision dream I had was because I asked, can I nudge this door back open? So I feel like it's available anytime because it's just an internal opening. It's like this full surrender, opening up, like, take me, do whatever, what you will with me, like show me the reality, and then it'll happen, if you're open enough to it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I think that's great. I agree. I think it's a pretty natural progression in like life in development, and you grew up a certain way and you figure out your own beliefs, and hopefully if you get to that point, but and then you may have like spiritual experiences that really get into it, and then you kind of come back down to earth, and I think there's just like the final step, maybe, or maybe just the next step is kind of finding that balance, I guess. Like, we came into this physical earth for a reason. This is our life to live, and we have responsibilities and other people to help, and
Right.
and that is important. That is part of this experience. But so is the spiritual. So how can we kind of balance between them? And that takes some figuring out. And
Absolutely.
and that's why some people like never really want to get into this in the first place. Like maybe they're just not ready to get into spiritual because they get just so lost in that. So
Right.
I understand that as well.
And also too, I think possibly the fear of, well, if I show myself something that is real in this spiritual realm, then it means all these fears that I've been told all my life are real as well, And it's like, yeah, well, you can't have one without the other. It's just like this endless duality of things. It's like, that is just the balance. Like, I think the spiritual side is just this, it's just a place of duality. It's like all the negatives you could imagine, they do exist there because it's all potential is there. All the positives you could imagine exist there because it's all potential. So it's like, I think that's the main thing to take away from spiritual practice is you're responsible for your outside circumstances. As far, of course there's things in the physical world that happen that you think, I'm not in control of this. Who knows if strings are being pulled on the other side, whatever. But, we have way more control over our internal space in our life than I think we want to give credit to. In this other place, it's like, it's just going to reflect that. Right. And that's what I've found in the astral. It's like out of body. It's like
taking more responsibility.
It's responsibility. Yeah. Who are you internally? This is what you'll be met with.
Yeah. And I think that takes a level of forgiveness and empathy towards yourself that some people just don't have. So they're not ready to take this responsibility because they're so hard on themselves that they can't handle that. So Absolutely. It also takes development and forgiveness and empathy for yourself for what you do have responsibility for that you've not taken on responsibility before, and also giving yourself empathy and forgiveness for not always doing the best with that, making the best decisions, but it's a process.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is all just like this big school of process, It's like, and I think like the spiritual side of things is like a whole other, you're signing up for a whole other like course, and it's like, people are like, I'm just dealing with the physical day-to-day course.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, it really is like signing yourself up for a new full course of, also it's a very in-depth, class of experience. And that's kind of why I shut it down in a sense, because I was like, I need to process what these semesters have taught me and like really put these to work. And really kind of like process this and integrate this in my life and integrate in my personal everyday being. Because if I just move past this to the next, it's like reading a book and not really trying to absorb the messages in it. It's like, oh, well, let's move to the next book and the next book. It's like you're just burning through all these things.
It's kind of bypassing too. It's like, oh, I just want the experience. I just want to be lost in this. But what is the lessons and what does that have to teach me about how I live my life in physical?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you chase all these experiences, like say the out of body state, it's like, well, what are you gaining from it besides just like a quick experience? It's way more than that, but it's how you wish to integrate it.
I love that. Have you heard the idea, kind of like spiritual people think that we're kind of in this raising consciousness in this kind of like to 5D Earth kind of idea?
Yeah. There's a lot of like, I guess like the new age stuff that you get brought into or exposed to whenever you start doing any of these type of spiritual practices. And some of it gets kind of like, people I think get lost in it and get really crazy, like frantic, like we're going to the 5D, it's all happening, it's shut down, which and two, I try not to have judgment and just try and have compassion. But I do think that there is a potential growth of our consciousness, because I mean, just even how we acted as beings, in the 40s and 50s, it's like there's a lot of that stuff. It's like, how could we have thought that way? Or most of us
like think about it, like slavery and racism like that.
Just
not that long ago.
It's not that long
there's still racism, but
sure, but like an open like public display of it,
and that's like normal.
It's insane. So I think that we are moving towards I think that it's inevitable that we have to progress, and our consciousness will progress along with all the information. I think that's one of the great things about the internet and social media is like we can be exposed to so many of these ideas,
right?
That if we care to entertain them, they can help our personal and spiritual growth. So yeah, potentially we move towards more of that, but I don't know. I kind of believe that this physical realm is a realm, like it's a school, it's a place for us to, like, we sign up to have certain experiences and play a certain part in other people's roles. Like maybe I'll play this role and I'll try and help you through it. You help me through it. So I don't know that we're moving towards like this grand, like,
utopia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, I love like fiction and fantasy, and I appreciate dystopian and novels, because it's like, you get too extreme about utopia, then it's going to end up a dystopia. So
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that the endless type of like duality of existence doesn't really allow for like one smooth sailing stream forever. I think maybe,
and two is like, you need some, just like lifting weights, like you need some roughness, and you need to like keep growing,
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe that's why we're here, because like we want to have this separation and this like forgetfulness of source, where we come from, and this friction and duality to just have the experience, because maybe on the other side there isn't as much of that. So it's like, well, let's go see what that's like, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny to me that like everybody that has like a life review and has these NDEs, it's like, what was the most important thing you accomplish? And it's how you make other people feel. And so I try and focus on that the most, it's like, how am I making others feel? Because that's the most important thing. We are all one. We are all a splinter of like this consciousness or this main source. So why don't we treat ourselves better? So when you go internal and treat yourself well, whenever you go external and treat someone well, I think it's the same thing. I think it's all one. And we're all having this temporary experience of forgetfulness and separation. And that's what our main longing of love and acceptance and all these things we long for is really just to get back to that.
Yeah. I love that. Do you want to end? Do you want to give a little instruction, like how people may be able to experience astral travel?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think to get a couple of books that would really be helpful, or, Robert Peterson, Hacking the Out of Body Experience. There's a great documentary called Insight Out by Jade Shaw. It's wonderful. And you can follow Jade Shaw. She teaches online courses. But really it's, look up the Wake Back to Bed method. Look into binaural beats, look into Bob Monroe and the Monroe Institute. If you really care about going into the practice itself, then just start playing around with the idea and imagining the reality that you are more than your physical body. And to try and imagine yourself surrendering and opening up to to the spiritual side of things and to the energetic aspect of our life, And there's multiple sources. I could probably name so many. Nancy Trivolato, she has a great book and a great YouTube channel. She also has a documentary she's in called Vodoris. It's a documentary on somebody that experienced sleep paralysis and moved into projection. There's endless sources on that, but I think it's really, if you choose to want to experience that, then just start to open yourself up to the reality of the subtle, energetic, reality of life.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there any final words of wisdom you want to leave us with?
Just be kind to yourself, be patient, be loving, take care of one another, and try and see yourself in every other person you come in contact with.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been fascinating. It's been interesting. It's been full of nuggets of wisdom. So really appreciate you coming on and being authentic and giving us everything. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. It's great to meet you, and I had a great time.